The discussion we had last week, we talked about Mumrim, some in a, I would say, positive light, some in a negative light. We talked about Avner of Burgus, and we talked about Ittel Schneer, Imre Saranteshes. We'll continue the discussion a little bit this week, but I'd like to take a little bit of a different turn. Now, again, I'm not looking to be flamboyant, and I'm not looking to be disparaging of any religion. I just want to discuss a concept and a topic. The person I want to talk about is a guy by the name of Muhammad Assad. Now, Muhammad Assad was born in 1900. His name was Leopold Weiss. He was the son of Akiva Weiss. Akiva Weiss was a lawyer, first person that deviated from his family's structure, which was a structure of Rabbanim in the Austro-Hungarian Empire for many, many generations. Akiva moved towards education, and his son, Leopold, or Label, moved towards more secularity. And at 18, he entered university. I think it was University of Heidelberg. He then quit at the age of 20, much to the dismay of his father. And he was encouraged by an uncle who lived in the Holy Land, who was lonely. And the reason of his loneliness was because he was an ardent anti-Zionist in an area and an era where everyone was very strongly Zionistic. So his uncle was very lonely, and he sent a communication to his nephew, and he asked him to please join him in the Holy Land, and the nephew did. And when he was there, he started writing articles, sending them back to different journals. I think he sent one specific article to 12 journals. He was rejected by all 11, except for one, which turned him into the Middle East correspondent. He then had a press credential to travel wherever he wanted to, and he decided to travel to Saudi Arabia. Slowly, from the age of 20 to 26, he falls in love with the desert nomadic people. He's very, I would say, overwhelmed, and he finds it extremely romantic, the Arab culture and the Arab personality. And a chance meeting one day has him meet King Abdulaziz, King Abdallah ibn Abdulaziz, which was the future king of Saudi Arabia, the first king of Saudi Arabia. Very tall man, very imposing figure, and he meets him in the mosque library in Saudi Arabia. I think the prince might have met him and brought him to his father, but from then on, a bond seemed to have been forged between the two of them, and it was a relationship that lasted for 6 years, where they saw each other every day. Overwhelmed by Abdulaziz's personality and by what he considered the beauty of a human being, he converts to Islam. So his name changes from Leopold Weiss to Muhammad Assad. Assad, I think, is the translation of Leopold, which is a lion. And he later on gives interviews. He dies in the 90s, somewhere in Spain, and he gives interviews, and he explains that the reason he felt called to Islam was the book was so overwhelming to him. He couldn't reconcile the fact that a shepherd, or whatever Muhammad was, would be able to write with such prescience, with such knowledge, with such ability. It had to be divine, and he was committed to that idea, and he stayed with that ideal for the rest of his life. So committed was he that he authored one of the most important translations of the Quran. And when Quranic scholars discuss, they discuss his translation, they discuss Mamadou Pickthall's translation. These are also, Pickthall was a convert from Christianity, a British convert. They discuss Yusuf Ali. These are all very famous translations of the Quran. And I think Oila al Kulana, the most important translation, I think is the translation of Leopold Weiss, the rabbinic translation of Muhammad Asad. He eventually moves to Pakistan. Before he ends up in Spain, he moves to Pakistan. I think he's the architect of the Islamic Brotherhood, and I think he's the architect of a certain type of egalitarianism. In no other country do you find a woman having equal rights like in Pakistan, where the ruler of Pakistan was Benazir Bhutto, different female rulers. This was all the architecture of Muhammad Asad. Now, but a little further digging into his life, and I saw writings and heard interviews from his brother-in-law and others in his family who talked of his tremendous disenchantment with Judaism. It wasn't just his love of the Quran, but he felt that when he studied Judaism and he was knowledgeable in Talmud, he learned in the Talmud Torah, his young life did occupy him with regular yeshiva, but when he studied and he learned Bishvil Yisrael, Shenikru Reishis, and he learned ideas where everything was for the Jew, these bothered him very much. At that point, there was 12 million Jews compared to the 1.4. Today, it's 1.8 to the 1.4 billion Muslims, to the close to 1.8 billion Christians. He couldn't understand why such a small nation would occupy such a great God, and why would it be so important for God to worry and to control and to dictate and to move mountains for this small Jewish nation. It made absolutely no sense to him. And as a result, he decided to seek out a nomadic tribe that he felt lives with the land, and he felt that God more than likely was favorable to these people. Now, while it's a valid and it's a good point, but I want to share a thought that I always had of why Assad is wrong, and then I want to discuss the reason for that in the context of censorship, and I'll explain. My metric system, and I guess the yardstick that I use, is the Nobel yardstick. If you want to look at the accomplishment of a race, the accomplishment of a civilization, there are 6 prizes that are given out by the Nobel Commission. Six, I would say, important prizes, and they definitely indicate accomplishment in the world. 4 are hard prizes. These are prizes where you had to really do something, and you're rated by peers who establish whether you accomplished, whether you contributed or not. 2, I would call soft prizes. The hard prizes are the prizes in medicine, physiology, physics, economics, and chemistry. That you had to, and somebody has to be made on your ability or of what you accomplished, and if not, it's not. The other 2, I would say, are much more arbitrary, and that would be peace. As we all know, Sadat, Yasser Arafat, Obama, these people won peace prizes, and we're not really aware of anything good that they really caused in the world. And then there's literature, which is also arbitrary, whether your book is a great book or is a great contributor to society. Okay, mechatesa. Now, I definitely understand that Islam was a great contributor to the world and to the, I would say, sociological progress. The Abu Sina, Ibn Rushd, these were philosophers, medicine men. The Arabic numerals that we have today were brought over from Hindu-Arab areas by somebody named Michelangelo di Paisano in a book called Liber Abaci. I understand that they were once a very great society. Arab architecture at one point was considered great architecture. Literature, maybe there was great literature back in the day. But if you look from 1901 till modern day 2020, and you look at the close to 1,000 Nobel Prizes that were given in these 6 categories, starting in 1991 to Henri Dunant, who was the International Red Cross leader. He was something of a great hero at that point. Till today, and you take a scan of how many prizes were garnered by the Muslim population of 1.8 billion people. And I don't say this with any disparagement. I'm just looking at the statistics, and I want to discuss it for a second. So you'll find that 12 Muslims won prizes. 6 of them were peace prizes, only 3 for hard sciences. So could you understand that only 3 from a once great, great civilization that contributed a lot to medicine and science, only 3 garnered prizes in the last 120 years for hard sciences? Now look at the Jewish population. At this point, 15 million people, close to 400 prizes, mostly in hard sciences. So you're talking about a small, minuscule population. But if you look at lists of their accomplishments, it goes much further than just the amount of prizes that they won. It's much more profound and it's much deeper. I'll start with a less known person like Gertrude B. Elyon, who was responsible for acyclovir, which is a treatment for herpes. And according to tabulators of how many lives saved with that simple little drug, this was a Jewish woman, never got married, was married to science. She, according to the lowest estimate, saved close to 50 million people with her concept and her Nobel Prize. She was also the contributor to drug ratios, which in turn saved many millions of lives by having people take exactly what they're supposed to take and not overdose. This is one of the lesser known people, but I could tell you about a guy who saved close to 2 billion people using those calculations. And I'm not talking about Shena Yidden. I'm not talking about people that learned Gemara and people that were Choifshei Beis HaMedrash, just Jews. Not all of them were proud Jews. Some of them were Mishumadim. Take, for example, Karl Landensteiner, who was the developer of blood types. He figured out that bloods A, B, A positive, B, O, they don't match with each other. And if you give somebody a transfusion with the wrong cellular structure, you will kill him. And he saved untold millions of lives. He was not a proud Jew. And in fact, in 1936, when the Who's Who of Jews published his name, he sued them and lost. He sued them to have his name stricken. He said, it could hurt my career. I'm not a Jew. I converted to Catholicism, or whatever he converted to. Landensteiner was not a proud Jew, yet his understanding and his Nobel Prize, I would say, contributed to the saving of many, many millions of people. In one story that I love to say over is in 1889, the British Scientific Society got together once a year, and often the awardee was given his award. He'd go on to speak boringly about British accomplishments in science. Most of the people would take their seat, they would nod off, an hour later clap and leave. But this was unique. This was probably one of the most memorable speeches in I would say British Scientific Society history. William Crookes, he's the inventor of the cathode. We don't have that anymore, but these were the tubes in the back of the television. He's also the inventor, not the inventor, but he coined an element by the name of thallium, which helped with spectroscopy. So Crookes gets up and he's going to give a speech. If you look at a picture of him, Sir William Crookes, he's a bearded, bespectacled individual, and he stands up there in his strength. He says, Britain and all civilized nations are going to face a famine soon that there will be no cure for. He says it's going to, at that point there were between 6 and 7 billion people. He says it will thin the population to the tune of billions. He says the dying will start in the 1930s. It will continue millions every year till it thins the population to a mere 300 million. And what was he worried about? He explained it was a very simple concept. It seems humans are made up of 4 things, of 4 substances. A human is made up of oxygen. We get that freely from the air. A human is made up of carbon. We get that from plants and from animals who eat plants. A human is made from hydrogen. We get that from water. But nitrogen, which is the 4th and most important component, we don't get that. That comes from soil, but only through nitrogen fixation. it requires either good fertilizer or planting legumes, beans, somehow in their root system, they cause a nitrogen fixation. Or the third way is through lightning. And Crookes calculated at that point that it would be impossible to feed the world with the amounts of nitrogen that we produce and have. And therefore he stood up there and everybody was glued to the seat of their chair, looking at him with, I would say, bulging eyes. He said, it's up to the chemists to figure out how we're going to save the next generation. Otherwise, prepare for famine. It is coming. And there was a young chemist there. His name was Fritz Haber. Fritz Haber was a Jew, not a proud Jew. At some point, he met Chaim Weizmann, and somehow he, I believe, restarted his pride. Fritz Haber is a controversial individual because he also created gas warfare. He also was the creator of Zyklon B, which ultimately killed millions of Jews. But Fritz Haber's ammonium nitrates, which is synthetic fertilizer, saved by estimates 2 billion people. 2 billion people. So this is, and we could go on. The list is tremendous. Abel Woolman is a guy who has just a building in Baltimore named for him. But this is a man that by every estimate saved close to 1 billion people by introducing fluoridation and chlorination to water. Most water systems use Woolman's ideas of fluoridation and chlorination. There's a building where people fight their tickets in Baltimore named for him, Abel Woolman Municipal Building. He didn't even win a prize. It wasn't considered a great enough idea. Now, the point is that, yeah, you talk about a minuscule people, and you talk about close to 400 Nobel Prizes, and you talk about the amount of life that they saved. Just this list alone, small as it is, but there's many more. There's close to 30 that invented and contributed ideas and concepts that would save millions, close to billions. Yeah, it makes sense that God pays attention to these people. It makes sense that these few are very vital and they garner a tremendous amount of hashgacha pratis. It makes a lot of sense. Now, why? What exactly is the ingredient? Depends. I always have a different idea. Right now, I want to talk about the idea of bikush emes. My understanding, we're talking about a mumar. Muhammad Assad definitely qualifies as a terrific mumar, not a very good guy, hurt us in a great way. But I want to show a little difference between Islam and Judaism, if I can. And again, I'm not looking to knock or to be disparaging. I'm just discussing what I know to be facts. And if somebody thinks that what I'm saying is not factual, no, I'll be very happy with that. Lamaisa, in terms of bikush emes, establishing what is truth and getting to truth and finding out and being committed to truth, there's a marshal in Bava Kama Daf Lamed Ches that I feel is very important. The marshal talks on the Gemara over there. The Gemara says that in the time of I don't remember exactly what time it is. It says Kvar Sholcha Malchus Rei Mishnei Sar Diotis Etzel Chachmei Yisrael. The Roman government sent two, let's say, constables or centurions to the Chachmei Yisrael, and they asked, Lamduni Teiraschem, teach us your Torah. Karu, they read, Shanu, Veshilshu, they read it, they repeated it, they did it a third time. Bishas Ptirasam, when they were leaving and they were going home, Amru, they told Chachmei Yisrael like this, Digdaknu b'chol Teiraschem. We checked through your whole Torah. We learned everything, we studied it completely. The emesu, and we see it as absolute truth. It's a very interesting idea. Chutz midavazeh, we have one problem. Chutz midavazeh, she'atem oimrim, shor shel Yisrael, shenogach shor shel Knani potter, v'shel Knani shenogach shor shel Yisrael, bein tam, bein mud, mishalem nezek shalem. You say something that's really, really non-egalitarian. It's not fair. You talk about an ox of a Jew that gored a non-Jew, and you say potter, and the reverse, you say chayiv. It doesn't make sense. It's unacceptable. It's judiciously unacceptable. People are people. They had a taina. But they go on, they say, we like the Torah, we like its structure. But we're not going to tell anybody. No one's going to know about this. You could go on unmolested. One could look at this and say, this might have been the beginning of censorship. This might have been the beginning when other religions were looking at our books and checking to see acceptable, not acceptable, good, bad. But it's an interesting Gemara. Tosfos asks a kasha. Tosfos is troubled by a halachic detail. Tosfos wants to know, how are they able to teach Nachrim Torah? It's Amalamed Torah la'akum over ba'asei magad dvarav li'Yaakov mishpatav li'Yisrael. How was it mutter? Tosfos answers two terutzim. One is they came under the guise of conversion, possible conversion. Then you're allowed to teach them everything. And the other teretz Tosfos gives, you're not mechuyev to be. They came and said, teach us. If you don't teach, they'll put you in jail. You're not mechuyev to be moiser nefesh. It's not Yehorig Val Yavar not to teach a Nachri Torah. So teach, that's it. You have no brainer, teach. So according to this teretz in Tosfos, let's understand. Tosfos asks the kasha, why did they teach? And Tosfos says there was a threat of death. There was the possibility that they would be killed if they wouldn't teach. That was a possibility. The Marshal asks the kasha, he wants to know, then why did they teach them the problem areas? Why didn't they lie about it? Why didn't they just say that those dinim are not true? So the Marshal says, Vais the from here, that Siluf HaTorah is Yehorig Val Yavar. It's a very chiddush, it's a big chiddush in the Marshal, but the Marshal in Baba Kama Lamed Ches says, it would appear from here that to change the truth of the Torah might constitute a bizraya da avodah zarah, might constitute avodah zarah almost, and it's so unacceptable that one would be obligated to give their life up rather than to change meaning, structure, or dinim in the Torah. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing what the Marshal is saying. Rabbi Moshe in Igros Moshe Archaim Beis Juvenun Aleph proves the Marshal's point from a Tosfos in the Darim of Chav Gimel. I don't want to take the time up with the proof, but Rabbi Moshe says it seems like Tosfos might be consistent with the Marshal, that the idea of Siluf HaTorah is so unacceptable that one would be obligated to give up their life for it. Now, again, it would be considered a bizraya da avodah zarah. And it's interesting, I just digress for a second, that the Marshal was so focused on nusach, girsa, diktuk, and shas, ad kedekach, that one of the first gifts that were given to us as a klal was the Chochma Shleima, which was published in, not clear whether it was Tov Mem Aleph or Tov Mem Zayin. I'll explain the difficulty in a second. But the Chochma Shleima, which is a book like this, this is the I'll show you in a second. This is the gift of the Marshal. This was after he passed away. The children of the Marshal, Rabbi Yechiel, and I think the other one was Reb Wolf, they collected the Marshal's shas, where they knew that he worked diligently with tremendous detail, and they gave the shas first to the Matfisei Kushta, and then eventually to Matfisim first they allowed the Gemara to be used by Matfisei Kushta, and then they published it in a book by Yitzchak Piham. It was a book. It's a handheld book. They write that they specifically published it in small format. Leman, anybody who's learning a Talmud, which was generally big, could run to the shelf and just pull it off, and I'll have right away the girsa. It's Mesuda according to the Dafei Hashas, according to Rashi, according to Tosfos. Unlike what we have in our back, this is much more user-friendly than the Chochma Shleima that we have in the back. I'm just going to show you an interesting thing for a second. But Kayadua, the Marshal who held Siluf HaTorah, was Yehorig Val Yavar. He was the one that was extremely busy with making sure the nusach, the girsa, the halacha was exactly the way it was supposed to be. In this Chochma Shleima, you could see it says like this. I got to look at it over here. It says. It says over here, Nitfas Poi Kila Kadesha Krakow, but the year is Shnas Sholem V'Shalva Yia Lanu Amen. I don't know if you could see. Could you see Shnas Sholem V'Shalva Yia Lanu Amen? So V'Shalva, you could see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so V'Shalva the words Vishalva equal up to Tuf Mem Zayin. Now, Tuf Mem Zayin would be 1587. But what's interesting is that if this was printed in 1587, Nosson Rabinowitz of the Dikdukei Seifrim says it can't be because Matfise Kushta in 83 already boast that they have the Agoyas of the Marshal. They already have some of the Agoyas of the Marshal.
1687.
No, 50.
Tuf Mem Zayin is 1687.
Sorry, Shin Mem Zayin. Shin Mem Zayin. It's 1587. So the shail is, do you take off the vishalva, the hey at the end, or the vav at the beginning? Until today, it's a suffix by bibliographers whether this was published in 1881 or in 1882. The Lunzer librarian felt it was 1881, and that's why he writes on the bottom of this volume. He writes Krakow, 1881. But most other bibliographers believe that it was Krakow, 1882. Doesn't really matter that much. The only point I'm making is Mamish the Marshal Shitosai. The Marshal was the guardian of Girsa, guardian of truth, and it makes sense that he was the first contributor. The shaila is what nusach of Shas the Marshal had, whether it was Bamberg 1, 2, or 3. It's interesting. Yitzchak Piham, the publisher, believes it was Bamberg 1. A guy by the name of Yitzchak Ran wrote a doctoral thesis recently. I don't think it was published in Mass, but I saw it quoted, where he believes that it was Bamberg 2, and he has many interesting proof on that. Not really important for that, for our discussion. Now, again, the Marshal's idea over here is Siluf HaTorah's Yeharag Val Yavar. I'm going to show that I would say most Shitas are not like that. But I want to just digress for a second. We're doing a little bit of a Jewish Islam comparison. So I want to say like this. Now, again, I'm not an Islam scholar by any stretch, but there is a verse in the Quran, which is in Surah 3, verse 28. And it depends which translation you read, but let's just take, for example, let's take, I have 6 translations. It talks about the idea of taqiyya. Now let me explain what taqiyya is and what tariya is. And again, nothing here is intended on being inflammatory. But Islam has a concept. Islam is very committed to truth, true, unless there's a few places where a Muslim is allowed to lie. Taqiyya, I think according to Islamic scholars, allows for 4 lies. One is, if it's pikuach nefesh, we also understand that we would lie for pikuach nefesh. If a person would be asked whether he's a Muslim, and if he would say he's a Muslim, he'd get killed, he's allowed to lie for the sake of saving his life. A person would be asked about his friend if he's a Muslim, and that would result in his friend's death. He's allowed to lie to save a friend. We see nothing wrong in this. We as Jews abide to the same ideals, and we would lie for pikuach nefesh of our own, of our friends. But here's an interesting thing. Muslims are allowed to lie for the sake of kiruv. Now, we might do that, but we're not allowed to do that. If you look at Memory TV, which is an interesting collection of important television clips that Jews and people that are defenders of the truth need to know, there is a clip of an Egyptian imam who's got tears in his eyes, and he's happily recounting a brilliant story of how an errant Jew was brought into the folds of Islam. And he tells brothers and sisters, listen to this beautiful story that occurred in some region in Mecca. There was a Jew, and he had some redeeming qualities. He wasn't like all the other Jews. And his neighbor, the Muslim, saw that he would be right to be brought into the fold. And he asked him one day, he said, Ibrahim, how come you don't convert to Islam? And Ibrahim said, I would love to, but I'm an alcoholic. I love the drink, and it's very hard for me to give it up. So the Muslim says to him, well, Ibrahim, in your case, we can make an exception. We could convert you even if you remain a drinker, and that would be fine. He says, if that's the case, he accepted the Shahada. He took on the Islam, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. Very simple. You say that you're a Muslim. I'm not. But you say that you're a Muslim. And he looked at his friend who was very joyous with him. He says, now what? He says, now if you drink, we'll beat you. He says, so I don't want to say, well, now, so I want to renounce Islam. And if you renounce Islam, we'll kill you. So like this, Ya'ani, he became a Muslim. Alhamdulillah, it was amazing how we brought him into the fold. This is taqiyya, and this is the beauty of taqiyya, and it's acceptable. Not only acceptable, it's laudable. That's taqiyya number 3, and that is problematic. That is very problematic. And taqiyya number 4 is if you want to wage war against a country or a village for the sake of Islam, to broaden Islam, to make it grow, then you are allowed to lie to them, and you're allowed to enter into some sort of a peace negotiation only to take over afterwards when you're able to. That's a taqiyya that's problematic. It makes it not believable, not credible. That's a taqiyya that's problematic. Then they have a second version of taqiyya, which is somewhat, I would say, on a lower level, and that's called ta'ariyah. I don't know if I'm pronouncing them 100% correctly, but that's a white lie. We're also okay with white lies. We're also okay with white lies. A white lie, such as a father who can't feed his children halal meat because he can't obtain it, might come home with meat and tell them it's halal, even though it isn't. As long as they don't know that they're sinning, that's okay. That would be acceptable according to Muslim law. Okay, that's not so terrible. We have Paiskim. There's a Nesivis in Reish Lamed Daled and Choshen Mishpat that holds that the Rabbanan is Bechlal not an Isser. It's not an Isser Hefza. Okay, we can make Tyrus over here also. But here's an interesting Tariya. If you're in an infidel's land and your friend rapes one of their daughters, and the policemen come and they catch him, and they ask you, did he do it? Well, no, you're allowed to lie. It's for your co-religionist. You're allowed to lie, stretch the truth. That's what's acceptable. That's Tariya. Not only that, this verse, if you listen to it carefully, let's say it with Pickthall's translation. This is Muhammad Marmaduke Pickthall. He says, let not the believers take disbelievers for their friends in preference to believers. Don't befriend people who are not maminim. Whoso does that has no connection with Allah, unless, here's why you might be able to take a friend who's not a Muslim, unless that you're guarding yourselves against them. You want to keep your enemies near you, and you want to create a friendship in a way that they feel comfortable with you. That's what it seems to mean, unless that you guard yourselves against them. Taking security. Allah bids you beware of himself. Unto Allah is the journey. The Muhammad Sarwar's translation is, the believers must not establish friendship with the unbelievers in preference to the faithful. Whoever does has nothing to hope for from God unless he does it out of fear or taqiyya. That's clear according to Sarwar's translation. Unless he does it out of fear or taqiyya. God warns you about himself. To God all things return. Now again, I'm not saying that we don't have, I would say, variations of this. But Lemaisa, if you compare a certain Bikusha emes that we're so involved in, we're going to sit here and discuss whether the Marshal is the Omginumena halacha or not. Whether there's a concept of Yehorig Val Yavar on Siluf HaTorah, when somebody's standing with a Roman sword ready to cut your head off if you say something that's incorrect, and the Marshal holds it's Yehorig Val Yavar, and compare that to sanctioned Taqiyya and Tariya, I think I understand why the contribution of 400 Nobel Prizes in the last 120 years might be a reality. This is a race that's looking by any cost for the truth. This is a people that wants to get to the kernel of what it is that is called truth, as opposed to a situation where the truth is not that important. I think I could understand what exactly is the governing difference. Now, just to discuss the Marshal for a second, I just for a moment, I want to show examples of censorship, just for a second, just to show you. Most people are very, very familiar with the famous censorships in Sanhedrin and in Soita. But here I want to show you some small nuances for a second. Just take Psachim. Psachim is the first Masechta that was printed by Bamberg. For whatever reason, he didn't start with brachas, he started with Psachim. Now, I have a Bamberg Psachim, or parts of a Bamberg Psachim. And I have a regular Psachim, and I want to show you a few nuanced differences that I think will give you a little idea of what we're talking about. Let's start for a second. On Daf Tzadik Daled Omid Beis, there's a Gemara that says like this. It talks about people who are able to make the Korban Pesach and unable to make the Korban Pesach. There are people that are out of the zone of Chiyuv, and we don't tell them to come back in if they're out of the zone of Chiyuv. But the Gemara has a kasha, V'atanya, and you look over here, V'atanya, Eliyahu, you want to read it? I can't see it. Do you see where it's underlined? Could you read it? I can't read backwards.
Hold on.
Where it's underlined, V'atanya Yehudi Orel.
I'm trying to hold it. It's not coming on my screen. Tzadik Chasam Beis?
No, it's Tzadik Daled Amid Beis. And it says like this, V'atanya. All right, I'll read it for a second. It says, Yehudi Orel Shalaimol Anush Kores. It's the third line from the top. I don't know if you see it. Do you see it?
Yeah, I see it, yeah.
Yehudi Orel Shalaimol Anush Kores. That word Yehudi is an untrue word. It was never part of the Shas. And the only way we know that is when we look at a Bamberg Shas, which was ironically published in Venice, but it was with the complete imprimatur of the church, and it was not censored. So when you look at the Bamberg Shas, it says like this, V'atanya Orel Shalaimol. I'm going to show you. V'atanya Orel Shalaimol. You see it over there? V'atanya doesn't say Yehudi, it says Orel Shalaimol. This is a Bamberg daf. Orel Shalaimol. Because Christians don't require Mila, and the censor, which started in Basel, the Basel censor put in Yehudi, and every Gemara, down to our Gemaras today, have Yehudi Orel Shalaimol, which doesn't belong there. You'd be surprised. Today, you open up a regular Gemara. This is Maduras Talmud. It has still the word Yehudi Orel Shalaimol. But even more than that, I'll show you such a fascinating Gemara. The Gemara in Psachim, Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amid Beis. Maybe you could bring it up on the screen, Eli. The Gemara in Psachim, Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amid Beis brings down like this. Shiva Menudim Lashamayim. This is one of the most famous Gemaras in Shas. 7 people are excommunicated by Shamayim, the Eluhaim. Now the first, if you look at the first, that's Shabbos.
Psachim Kuf Yud Beis?
Kuf Yud Gimel Amid Beis. Psachim Kuf Yud Gimel Amid Beis. If you look there, it says Shiva Menudim Lashamayim, the Eluhaim. These are them. So the first one is Yehudi She'ein Lo Isha. You see that? Yehudi She'ein Lo Isha. Stop. Shiva Menudim Lashamayim. You see it? Ve'elohem Yehudi she'ein lo isha. You see, you could underline it. You see it. Shiva menudim lashamayim. It's about 10 lines from the bottom.
Yeah,
Shiva menudim Elohem Yehudi she'ein lo isha. What's this with Yehudi she'ein lo isha? Mi she'ein lo isha. Yehudi she'ein lo isha is menudim lashamayim. Novos. The teretz is that in the Council of Nicaea or the Council of Trent, the Christianity started becoming celibate. There was a very big emphasis on celibacy. As we all know, during the apostolic times, they had wives. The apostolic times had wives, but I think either in the first Lateran, which is in the 1200s, or in the second Lateran in the 13. First Lateran is 1123. Second Lateran is 1140. Their celibacy started becoming an ikar. So a Jew who doesn't have a wife may be menuda l'shamayim, but a non-Jew is considered very much married to God. Celibacy is a very important feature according to the Catholics. So Basel Shas took out, put in Yehudi Shein Laisha. But if you want to see the Bamberg Shas, I'll show it to you over here, Shiva Menudim Lashamayim. I don't know. Can you see it? Shiva Menudim Lashamayim. You able to see it?
It's a little, maybe center it more to the screen. Oh.
Second. Can you see it now?
A little bit higher.
Right here. It's Shiva Menudim Lashamayim.
Yeah.
Elohim.
Mishain Laisha.
There's no Yehudi. There's no Yehudi. There's nothing to do with the Yehudi. This was the Nusach HaGemara. The Nusach HaGemara doesn't concern itself with non-Yehudi. It's a book for Jews. Why do we have to say Yehudi? And the same thing with you. And in Psachim, there's a few places like that, except that I can't show it to you. Koydem kol, I only have the second half of Psachim from Bamberg. And also, most of them were fixed. In Psachim on Daf Nun Tes, when it talks about Amoratzim, early Gemaras that were censored also had Amoratz Yehudi mutar l'noich b'yom HaKippurim. Amoratz Yehudi you can't marry. There was a tremendous amount of Yehudi stuck into a lot of the Agadah and Psachim to make sure that it shouldn't be confused with a non-Jew. And just to show you, I have not a Basel Gemara, but I have a Zolzbach Gemara, which was the identical of Basel. And I want to show you a page from Baba Kama Daf Lamed Ches, which you'd be surprised. Baba Kama Daf Lamed Ches, which is the Gemara we just learned. Here's the normal Baba Kama Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. You see, it's a full page. The Gemara is nice, robust, down to the discussion that we had on the bottom of the page. And here's the censored Basel Gemara of Baba Kama Daf. I don't know if you could see it. Could you see how much of the page is missing? The page is completely censored. This is the amount of Gemara in the Basel Gemara. Same Surah Sadaf, always the beginning and end is identical, but censored completely. And in Kuf Yud Gimel, where all the discussions of Gezel Akum and all the discussions that are highly inflammatory to non-covenantals. So, also, I'll show you the Basel Gemara. The Basel Gemara is completely, the whole bottom side is vacant because such was the fear and such was the obligation. Now, just before we close today, I want to share with you something that I saw. And in a book, in a magazine called Censorship in Tafshin Tes Vav, some librarian found a book called Yesoida Ibur. It was written by a Talmud of the Rosh, whose name was Rabbi Yitzchak Yisraeli, and it was published by Rav Baruch of Shklov. Rav Baruch of Shklov was a publisher, a doctor, a grandnephew of the Shagas Aryeh from Vilna. He had a grandson by the name of Paul Margolin. They were also a nephew of the Mishkanis Yankiv, Rav Yankiv of Karlin. Paul Margolin was the Russian censor. He was a vile anti-Semite, and he wrote many vitriolic tomes against Jews. Not only that, the years that he was censor, no volumes of Choshen Mishpat were ever published in Russia, because Choshen Mishpat is not acceptable. It's the Tsar's rule that's important. Choshen Mishpat is like Sharia law. And in his understanding, it was an unacceptable piece of work. But yet, there's something very fascinating. In the Sifriya Laumit, there is a censored book, Yesoida Ibur, published by Paul Margolin's grandfather, Paul Jacob Margolin's grandfather, with his handwriting and censorships on his grandfather's Pirush on Yesoida Ibur. And in it, he writes on one of the pages, he says, when he sees something that he likes from his grandfather, he says, Kain Adoni Avi Zekeni Daiti Kedaitcha Anoichi Paul HaMashichi Lebeis Margolin Nechet Venin Lecha and Benasasi Yeshmai Baruch Biyosi Bebris Hayadus. And then, in one of the areas where the Sefer leaves a big blank space, so in 1874, Paul writes with his own handwriting, thinking no one will ever see this. This was his own, I would say, nivche hanefesh, maybe a call from the depth of his heart. He writes like this: Ata avi zekeni, you my grandfather, hinachta es pisas haniyar hazeh. You left this piece of paper blank. Leman lezecher oilam, echte vezechroini. Yan, he says, I know ki avasenu elecha ad bilti shamayim. Our love to you is up to the heavens. Alkein, chus berachim aleinu, v'tizkerenu le'es kates. It's a very interesting thing. The guy's an anti-Semite. He writes with vitriol against his co-religionists. You cannot recognize that he ever had a trace of Judaism other than his knowledge of what to subvert. But he's writing to his grandfather, begging him to remember him, le'es kates. Ki mi yotzei chalotzecha anachnu. We're your grandchildren. V'kol tikvaseinu alecha. Our hopes are all towards you one day. Yan ki chocham v'tzadik ayisa. Avaloi tzavua u'mischasid. Then he goes on and he rants about something bothering him. But this is an amazing thing. Even a mumar, who by every standard was a terrible individual, suffers with his decision, has a very big difficulty, writes under the clandestine cover of anonymity, something that he hopes no one will ever see, but he feels he's connecting. Okay, Yashikoyach, thank you very much.
Yashikoyach, thank you so much.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Wow.
Could
I'm just wondering if your point that you're saying that there's some kind of search for the truth in the genes of a Jew?
Hey, you know what? That goes back to the nurture-nature discussion. I don't think anything is completely genetic, nor do I think anything is completely nurtured. There has to be some sort of a fusion between the two. But certainly, our whole attitude to everything revolves around the bikush emes. People in yeshivas scream at each other for the truth. Academicians in the halls of academia scream at each other for the truth. And yeah, I think genetically, our forefathers were truth seekers. Avraham Avinu sought the truth. Our forefathers were built on legends of truth seeking. So yeah, is it genetic? Is it nature or nurture? I can't say the brirus, but I could say that we,
There's one way to test it, where you can see how far the talent or whatever it is what they produced down the generations, it lasted. Would you find someone who's already assimilated for 4 generations as being a mevakesh as emes, and being as productive and creative like all these 400 people, or they were 2nd generation frayakis or third?
I'm not sure if that would be. I'm not sure if that's an adequate test. I'm saying I hear what you're saying, but when you walk around with the stutchin of being a Jew, even if you're 4 generations removed, but that's somewhat imprinted in your not your genetic double helix. It's imprinted in your attitude. I'm not sure that there's really a way to test. There might be a philosophical way to test.
I don't know. The Torah has a musig about that. Dervi. Some umas can't be call till the 4th generation. Some even 10 generations can't. So
I don't know that that's called genetic weeding. I don't.
There is such a metric, though.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that the Moabite get weeded out genetically after the Mitzrayim after 10, the Moabites after 3, and Amaleki never. I'm not sure that genetic weed whacking is really I don't think that's what it is.
I hear.
I definitely hear it's a nice thought. It's something to
I'm just wondering. I'm wondering. you basically you stel da weg an idea, and I just would like to understand what it's based on. You know, if there's a science